Hello and welcome to the Other Kind of Doctor podcast. My name is Gemma.
And my name is Gaia, and we are both on the journey of gaining a PhD.
A quick disclaimer before we start. We are in fact the academic kind of doctors.
Well, nearly doctors.
Yes, nearly doctors. But we're not your medical kind of doctors.
So if you do need medical attention, please contact your GP.
Now, let's get on with the episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Other Kind of Doctor podcast.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! How have you been this week, Gaia?
Well, I've got a sore throat,
Oh,
and I'm not being very brave about it.
oh yeah, she does look really sorry for herself.
Yeah. How was your week been?
I have had an unproductive week. Well, it's been productive in that I've been marking still. I literally finished yesterday. So now I'm desperately trying to catch up with all the work that I haven't been doing over the last 2 weeks. But yeah, I've been all right. What have I been watching on telly? I haven't been watching anything, but I am listening to a new audiobook.
What is it?
Can't remember the title.
That's great content, Gemma.
It's like a thriller that's set in Scotland. So it's a bit like moody. And it's about like a murder investigation.
Okay.
And it's like a whodunit audiobook, and it's with a Scottish like narrator as well. It's really good actually.
I've been watching Love is Blind, so literally same vibes.
Very similar vibes. Okay, so what are we talking about today?
Motherhood in Academia with Dr. Sarah Sampson.
Yeah, so we've just finished our interview with Sarah, and it was a really good episode, I think. And I think it's really important that we have guests on like Sarah who, you know, have had, you know, these experiences, because there's only so much that Gaia and I can comment on. There's only so much that we can talk about.
Very little.
Very little. Funnily enough, we don't have the knowledge of everything in the world, but. So I learnt a lot actually, and it was really nice to hear Sarah's experience, and I'm sure it'll be really helpful for lots of PhD students listening to this. Okay, let's get on with the episode.
Hello.
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 Oh, who's this? Sounds like we've got another guest.
Who's this?
So today we're really excited to have Dr. Sarah Sampson in the podcast studio today. And what are we talking about today, Gaia?
We're talking about motherhood during the PhD.
Yeah. So we like to start this with every guest, but we wondered if you could tell us a bit about you, when you completed your PhD and what your PhD was in. If you want to give a bit of background.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Very excited.
You're very welcome.
So I did my PhD at Reading in 2005. I started it. So I kind of was thinking to go down the clinical route, but I then decided to do my PhD. So I carried on my PhD from a research assistant post that I had been doing a few years previous, which was examining emotional regulation and behaviour in initially a sample of like 3-month-old babies, and then they were it was a prospective study. So for my PhD, I used data from when the children were 12 and 18 months, and then followed them up again at 5 years. So I was specifically interested in early precursors of disruptive behaviour in children. So that was kind of my PhD.
That sounds so complex.
It sounds really interesting though.
Yeah.
Well, it was an interesting thing because it meant I had like a load of data that I could use. I think the earliest stuff I used was like from when the babies were 12 weeks old, looking at their emotion regulation and how that developed over time. And I was also interested in parenting behaviour, so like how sensitive mums were and how that impacted on their children's behaviour at 5 years.
Oh, that's so nice.
That's so interesting. I love working with longitudinal data. It's like so interesting
and the little babies.
The little babies. What was it like working with babies?
Were they bold?
Of course they were bold.
Some babies aren't.
Yeah, well, so when I saw them were like 12 and 18 months, so that's quite a cute time, but trying to get babies to do what you want them to do. And some of the tasks were sort of quite mean. So we'd give the baby a toy to play with, and then we'd take it away to see how upset they would get.
Oh God, that is brutal.
So it was a bit harsh, and you had to be kind of quite flexible as to, you know, to get the best out of the baby. Yeah, it was, and kind of seeing the mums and the babies together, that was good. But, you know, that was a massive task trying to code all, like, it was like about a 15-minute interaction that we did at 12 months, 18 months, and then a slightly longer one at 5 years. So that was pretty intensive when you came to coding that, but it was fun.
Yeah. Okay, so Sarah, obviously we know you because we work in the same department, but we remember you mentioning, or why we've brought you in, is that you were pregnant during your PhD, or towards the end of your PhD. So we wanted to talk about kind of entering motherhood, or like submitting your thesis whilst, you know, trying to manage all of these other things that you've got going on, because PhD students are way more than their research. They've obviously got all of their own stuff going on. And I think the reason we wanted to look at this topic is because when people embark on a PhD, they're typically in that kind of chapter where they're kind of moving and have like big, you know, milestones in their personal life as well. Like, not to talk about myself, but I am getting married this year. But, you know, we're doing, in this age, we kind of end up doing, you know, other things. So, and, you know, having babies comes with that. So I think the kind of the first question would be kind of, what was your experience of all of that, and the kind of how you found it, I guess.
Yeah. So like you said, Gemma, it is a time, and certainly for me, because I think I was about 30 when I started my PhD. So I was already married, and initially when debating whether to kind of do my PhD, I kind of thought, oh, that might work out well, because I could easily have a baby whilst doing my PhD.
Whilst researching babies. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, as I was coming towards the end of my PhD, I decided that I could actually finish my PhD and work full time. So I'd taken a research assistant post.
And doing your PhD.
And doing my PhD. So that was fun. And then in this time, so I was already busy with working full time, trying to finish up the first draft of my thesis. I then fell pregnant. So I had the challenges of not only working, but feeling pretty rough. And so I was struggling to actually get on with my thesis. Anyway, I kind of muddled through, and there was a little bit of miscommunication with me and my supervisor. I thought my draft was ready, so just went ahead and submitted it, and she was like, it wasn't ready, but at that point I've submitted.
Oh wow.
So as it materialised, I then had my viva when I was 36 weeks pregnant, so I had a month to go. And it was quite a brutal viva, because obviously I'd submitted something that my supervisor wasn't 100% happy with, which, you know, led to quite a lengthy discussion during my viva, where I was trying to defend what I'd done and how I'd done it, which basically meant I had major revisions to do.
Right.
Which I kind of expected, but timing-wise wasn't ideal. So I didn't do anything at that point, and I then had my baby, so I had the challenges of getting home with this newborn baby and going, okay, well, that's it. There's no going back now. So I had the challenges of kind of struggling with like getting used to being a mum, and kind of people thought, well, you know, your PhD's in babies, surely that's going to be much easier. But it was definitely a double-edged sword. So I had all this theory that I'd written about and kind of best practicing as being a mum. And then when you're struggling with a baby who's crying and you're tired and you know what is best practice and you're like, I'm just muddling. So there was so much guilt, and it really made me think about how I kind of evaluated these mums on their parenting style in a 15-minute window when I had no children. And I was really judgmental, and I was like, it really gave me hindsight that if I were to do that again, if I went back and looked at that parenting behaviour again, I would probably totally rescore it, kind of being a bit more generous. So that was kind of that stage, and then my supervisor gave me a little bit of time, but basically then when my daughter got to about 3 or 4 months, I then was really encouraged to get on and start working on my revisions.
How long did you have? So did your time off count towards your time to be able to do the revisions, or was it something? Was it like, so did you have more time because you'd had a baby, or was it still the amount of time that you usually get when you have revisions?
It was, I would say it was a little bit more, because they kind of didn't start it they kind of delayed my start time.
Right, okay.
But obviously at this point it's now totally unfunded. So,
Yeah.
you know, I guess in one way I was on maternity leave, but as it was. But the way I kind of managed juggling a baby and doing my PhD basically meant that I would have to basically pack up kind of a baby's life in my car and drive down to my parents' home in Somerset. And it was very much a routine of wake up at like 6:30, feed baby, get some breakfast, hand baby over to grandma, and then work, and literally work, stop, feed, work, stop, feed, work, stop, feed, and, you know, hope they have a nap. And so my day was pretty much like that from 6:30 till like maybe 10 o'clock at night. And that was, I wouldn't have the weekends. It would just be, let's make the most of the time where I'm staying at my parents'. And I would probably stay there for like 2 to 3 weeks at a time.
Okay.
And then going back home, it just wasn't really practical to kind of do much. But it kind of felt that you never really settled anywhere. So it was kind of like, I wasn't like a typical PhD student, so I didn't have that kind of support from fellow students.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. It just seems like, not that you were, obviously you had support with your parents and things like that, but like doing a PhD, it's really difficult to have that support from people who aren't in academia, and being able to talk about, you know, PhD stuff to others is, you know, that are going through that is, you know, I know I find it really beneficial. So that must have been, and difficult.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, I never really kind of gelled with mum friends because I was kind of not there. So I kind of felt quite isolated.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge, and I guess that took, I think I eventually submitted again probably about a year later. So I had a good year of kind of juggling trips to Somerset to get chunks of work done. So that, I would say I did that for about a year before I resubmitted. So it was pretty full on.
Did you have any support from the university? And what do you think, what support should they provide, do you think?
I didn't have any support as such, but then basically because I kind of extended my time that I should have been at university, maybe they didn't feel obliged. My supervisor was kind of helpful to a point, but hers was very much, can't you just, you know, put your child in nursery? And it's like, well, I can't afford to put my child in nursery.
Yeah.
And also she's only little and I don't want her to be in nursery.
And obviously I'm a developmental researcher as well. You obviously, and when you're familiar with the research, like you said, you're like, oh, okay, well, if I make this decision, then that has this implications. And so I can imagine that kind of, you know,
exactly. That was my thing. It was kind of, I was very much of the stance of no kind of group childcare until they're at least 3. So I was like, I didn't want to do that even if I could financially afford it. But it did mean that Eliza used to come into the department and have meetings with my supervisors and my secondary supervisors. And luckily it was like it was a developmental unit. So it was nice. She could sit on the floor and play with some toys when she was a bit bigger, but so she got the whole kind of university experience quite soon.
That's why she's so smart now.
Training her from a young age.
So after your PhD, after you resubmitted, you decided to take a break.
Yeah.
Was there a difficult decision? How come you came to that decision?
So I'll briefly go into this because I don't want to bore the listeners. But so whilst I was on maternity leave, I was meant to go back to work, but they moved my office and wouldn't allow me to work from home.
Oh, okay.
So my commute was then going to become 2 hours each way, which I said was not reasonable. So I had to go through a tribunal as well as my PhD and Eliza at this time. I also had to kind of raise issues with my work establishment at the time. So then I kind of thought I didn't want to go back to work. And there were times when I considered it as Eliza got a bit older, but then I fell pregnant again. And then I wanted to be with the children. And maybe in hindsight wouldn't have stayed as long, but it was just kind of logistics. My partner at the time, his work didn't afford me the flexibility to go back to work without putting the children into full-time kind of nursery care. And that wasn't really something that I was prepared to do. So in that sense, I do value that I did get to spend that time with the
Yeah.
children, but maybe longer than I would have hoped for, really. Yeah.
So you briefly mentioned about the support that your supervisor was able to give you. Kind of looking back now, what kind of support do you think supervisors might, or what information do supervisors need to be aware of if, for example, they have a PhD student that is going, entering motherhood and things like that? What kind of support do you think they need to be giving?
I think they need to be as flexible as possible, and that whilst, we might agree kind of deadlines for, writing up your next chapter, that isn't always going to be feasible. And if you've arranged meetings, again, your child is always going to come first. So there needs to be a huge amount of flexibility, and maybe just kind of checking in that not only how your PhD is going, particularly if you're a first-time mum, sort of checking in on how you are doing as a person, because that's kind of really paramount in your mental well-being to actually get on and get your PhD done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes supervisors could get lost in just checking on the research progress, but I do definitely think that kind of supporting the mental health well-being side of things is really important, and that ultimately is going to make your research better. If you're in a better place and you feel more supported, you're going to have better outputs than if you kind of do feel a bit cut off from that side of things.
Yeah. So after Eliza became a proper person,
Proper person.
yeah, she's a human now, you decided to come back in academia.
Yeah.
Was that a joyful decision? How did you come to that?
So now once both the children were at school, I kind of felt a bit more comfortable with looking for a part-time role. So I was excited to go back into academia, and initially I went back in as a research assistant, which was slightly, I'm not sure annoying is the right word, but I was like, I know I'm a postdoc, but I couldn't find any postdocs, and I was like, I need to get back into research. I've been out of it too long.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt a bit awkward because I felt like I wasn't where I should be, and I was surrounded by lots of young research assistants who might only be in their early 20s. So I did feel kind of quite old, but it kind of brought my confidence back. I felt kind of quite, this is what I meant to do. I felt more myself, because I think for me, not for everyone, but sometimes being a mum, you can lose your identity.
Yeah.
So I did feel quite kind of positive about going back.
How long were you in your research assistant role for?
So I was in my research assistant post for 2 years. That should have also been working with babies, but we had the pandemic, so that all became online.
The joys.
Yes. So I was there for 2 years, and then I made the decision to go into teaching for kind of more stability, and thought, yeah, let's give that a go and see how that pans out.
How are you finding being a teaching associate?
Actually, I was surprised, because I don't like presenting, and people might ask, why do you do that job then? Because you have to stand up in front of people. But then, you justify it yourself, going, well, that's a small part of what I do.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of get on with it. But I enjoy it much more than I thought that I would. But I would say I still have the same kind of difficulties that I had when I went back as a research assistant, because I'm a grade lower than where I should be. And, I'm working alongside PhD students who are doing the same job as me, who are, maybe in their 20s. So I still kind of struggle a little bit with where I should be, and feeling I guess kind of sometimes feel embarrassed as to where I am.
Right.
Thinking, if I hadn't have done that, I could be in a different position. But I kind of try to offset that by thinking, well, I did get to spend all this time with my children, and hopefully that's been positive for them as well as for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just from knowing you the last 2 years, your confidence definitely has increased. And I feel like, whatever you go on and do after this, I think it's don't know. It's difficult to comment when you haven't been in that position. But I feel like all of these experiences are going to inform what your later career is going to be like. So when you are maybe go on and do like a postdoc, if that's teaching focused or research focused, and then if you go and secure like a lecturer position or anything like that, I feel like all of these experiences are going to make you a better lecturer and a better provide better support to students that someone like me who hasn't had all of these experiences, I'm going to be coming at things from a completely different angle. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. You're such a great teacher, way more than us were in our 20s.
Yeah, definitely. And then even like if you go and do developmental research, again, like you said earlier, you're going to be looking at this from a completely different lens, and that's probably going to make you a better researcher, or definitely have more of an open mind about things for sure. Something that kind of resonated with me when you were just talking there was kind of imposter syndrome, kind of feeling that kind of, do I belong? Like, am I where I should be? Do you think you're experiencing that? Does that kind of sum up what you were saying?
Yeah, definitely. It's like this imposter syndrome. Can I do it? So thinking about, well, should I apply for, a higher grade job at some point? And then I can try and talk myself out of it, like going, oh, maybe I don't have the skills. And even this year when I came back in September and I was asked to teach on the master's course, I was like, oh no, the master's, that's going to be really hard. I can't do that. So imposter syndrome is something that I do struggle with quite a lot.
Do you think that we should probably do a whole other episode on imposter syndrome.
And we will, stay tuned.
We will, stay tuned, listeners. But I feel like, especially, I don't know, maybe this is just my preconceived ideas, but if it had been a man in your position making a career, having a small career break and then coming back, I do think that maybe that experience or those feelings might not have been the same, but that is probably just my opinions. But
yeah, no, I mean, I kind of agree with that to a certain extent. So it's kind of like I still feel like I'm the primary caregiver. So sometimes, say, for instance, if the children were poorly, I would feel that that's my role to go and deal with that, rather than, a father maybe would do that less. So I feel that they could maybe re-establish their career a lot easier.
Yeah,
but
that's a good point.
Yeah. I actually read some research about imposter syndrome. Sorry, giving you a little teaser to a future episode. But imposter syndrome is more prevalent for people who are from marginalised groups, women, and first-time university students, first-generation university students.
Makes sense.
That would make sense.
So, what support do you think universities should provide to people coming back from a career break?
Again, I think flexibility is key, and I've been really lucky here that, my teaching hours generally allow me to get back home without having to worry, that I'm going to get back on time. So I think flexibility is key, but also, again, just remembering that we have lives outside of our work. And to be fair, I think like my line manager and the colleagues I work with are really supportive of that, and I don't feel bad to say, oh, could someone cover me, or can we swap a session so that I can go and see my child's sharing assembly, for example. So that's really lovely that I can do that. So I think it's just remembering that we are more than just, be it your case, a PhD student, or that we are just whatever job role we have here. And it's in the department there are some forums about what it's like being a mum and working, which has also been really helpful, because then you don't feel quite so alone.
Yeah.
Or
having those sharing experiences, I think, is really powerful, or like not motivating, but like encouraging that, kind of lessening that imposter syndrome. I think like sharing your experience with other people and even just seeing how they do things and getting ideas from them is really cool. Just to finish off, I wondered if you could give a top tip for other PhD students that might be entering motherhood during their PhD, which is a big question.
That is a big question. I would say, unless you absolutely have to, wait till your PhD is done, because there is that kind of saying that your thesis is like a baby. And when it is finally done, it kind of does feel the amount of blood, sweat and tears you put into it. But if you are in the situation where you are having a baby, just make sure that you've kind of got some supporting system from a practical sense, and just kind of try to keep in contact with your kind of fellow PhD students, and have a conversation with your supervisor about how you would like that to look like and what you think you could manage.
Nice. So where can people find you online?
If they want
now
to.
that you're famous.
Now you're famous. Now you've been on the podcast. Are you on Twitter? Are you on anything?
I'm sure you can Google Sarah Sampson.
Do you have a pure page on Royal Holloway? Right.
You cannot find Sarah anywhere.
You can't find Sarah anywhere.
Do not search for her.
You can only find Sarah on this podcast, so you'll just have to re-listen to this podcast.
You've got exclusive rights.
Well, thanks so much for coming in, Sarah. It's been really lovely to chat to you, and thanks so much for sharing everything you did today. It's really, I think, a really important topic to discuss, so we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind words as well. Thank you.
Brain bites. Oh, that was hard to do with us.
Is that hard to do with your little sore throat?
Yeah.
Bless you.
So, what are we talking about today?
So, this week, I am wondering whether pets are good for people's well-being. And I say that because, as listeners might know, I have 4 dogs. Yes, I'm insane.
Everyone knows that.
Everyone knows, because that's all I talk about. I usually think my dogs are quite good for my well-being. They get me out, I get to go on nice walks, I get to have a little cuddle, but also sometimes they're not good for my well-being, and I'll tell you for why. At the weekend, my dogs ate my lovely focaccia bread.
Tragic.
If anyone's got a golden retriever, they'll know that golden retrievers are thieves, especially young ones.
But they're so cute, so it's fine.
They are very cute, but they literally stole my focaccia bread off the side of my...
You did leave it on the counter, so really whose fault is it?
Okay, it was my fault for leaving it on the side. But yeah, that wasn't good for my well-being because I couldn't eat my bread, which is obviously really important.
See, similarly, but not at all, my cat once, so I was writing an email to my supervisor, and my cat walked on the keyboard, wrote random letters, and then sent it. That was beautiful.
What did your supervisor reply?
I do not remember. This was during my master's, so it was still my current supervisor, but it was long ago enough that he probably doesn't remember, thank God.
That's good. I'm surprised he took you on as a PhD student if he thought that you just wrote random letters and sent it to him. So we had a look at some of the research, and what did they find, Gaia?
So Wells, in 2009, found that even though the evidence for a direct causal association between human well-being and pets is not conclusive, the literature they reviewed is largely supportive of the long-standing belief that pets are good for us.
So really, pets are good for you?
Yeah, even if they eat your focaccia.
Even if they eat my bread, my focaccia. But obviously, if you don't like animals, then they're probably not very good for your well-being, are they?
Also, why would you not like animals?
A lot of people don't. Some people don't like pets, and that probably would not be good for your well-being, listeners.
No.
But if you do like pets...
Don't get 4 dogs if you don't like pets.
Yeah, don't get 4 dogs if you don't like dogs, because that probably wouldn't be very sensible. No. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed another episode. We really enjoyed recording it. If you have any ideas for future episodes, or you have a really good guest that we could bring on, please feel free to send us a message on social media, or we've got a contact us part of our webpage as well that you can fill in. Don't forget to subscribe and review our podcast on your chosen podcast platform. Where can people find us on social media?
At @theotherdoctor_pod.
That's wrong. It's at @otherdoctor_pod.
I'm feeling poorly.
I told you she's feeling really sorry for herself. You can access all of our transcriptions on our website, and a big thank you to the Royal Holloway Doctoral School for supporting this podcast, as well as our fantastic behind the scenes podcast team. And that's it. Bye.